Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Hey, how you doing out there today? And thank you for listening to this podcast today, the official launch of Podtastic Audio. I am Chris of the Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find that at www.chrisandchristineshow.com. That is Chris and Christine, both with the letter K for the name. And if you have heard us on that podcast, you realize, you know what? That show sounds pretty good. You guys actually know what you're doing when it comes to putting audio together. I mean, you guys must have this big, fancy studio, and you guys must have all this elaborate equipment and mixers, and you guys, I mean, people assume that, but the truth is, we really don't. We have like super basic stuff. And I'm trying to tell you guys is that you do not need thousands of dollars of equipment to make a podcast, or at least any kind of podcast that at least sounds somewhat decent sounding. That comes later, but you can invest thousands of dollars of equipment. Now, I always tell people this is almost like golf. I don't really play golf that much, but if you do go play golf, there are two major extremes that you can buy for golf clubs. If you ever go to a store like a sporting goods store or anything like that, you can buy a set of golf clubs for merely like $60, $70, less than $100. You can get a decent set of golf clubs and play golf. Or you can go on the other extreme and you can spend $10,000 for a set of golf clubs. At the end of the day, they both hit balls on the golf course. You can still play the game. And you can probably play a pretty good game with a basic set of golf clubs. And that's what I'm trying to tell you guys here on this episode, on this podcast, is that you can make decent audio with basic equipment. You do not need thousands of dollars of stuff. And that's what I'm going to show you guys here. And if you think I'm fooling you guys, listen to our other podcast, or even this one, really, you're listening to right now. But on our other podcast, the Chris and Christine Show, we were able to produce a show with literally nothing starting out. And we've advanced over the years a little bit with, I say years, we've only been doing it since 2019. So we've got a year and a year and a half doing it so far. And what I've learned doing it is that audio really does matter, and how you record it, and also how you send it out to the world, because you think about it, everybody's listening to this thing, whether it's on their phone, whether it's in their car, whether it's on their computer. I mean, not everybody has the same type of equipment, and not everybody's listening to it in the same environment. So keep that in mind. But this podcast I'm doing for you guys right now is to show you guys some of the tips and tricks on how to create a good sounding podcast that at least it will sound decent enough to where you will almost fool anybody that's listening. That's kind of why I like the audio version of podcasting. I'm not really a fan of the video podcasting, because I think that's more of like a YouTube thing. And if you have a podcast and it's like a video Zoom recording that you record and that you put it on, like, say, YouTube, and you say, here's my podcast, check it out. No, that's not a podcast. You are a YouTuber. That's what you are, not a podcaster. So podcasting for this show and for what I'm talking about, it's going to be audio only, just like radio, just like music. Audio. It's the audio is where people, for some weird reason, they always have a hard time figuring out audio. It's weird. If you buy a new iPhone, and every single year they upgrade the iPhone camera, they make a big deal about the cameras in the iPhone. It's like it's got the new lens, it's got the new pixels, and blah, 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 blah. But then when it comes to microphones on the phone, they may upgrade them, but it's not a selling point. people seem to know how to shoot video very easily. I don't think you can screw that up. You just point the camera and you just hit record. For some reason with audio, I don't know what it is, but people cannot figure out how to do good audio. And I know it sounds hard because you think, well, I just put this microphone in the general area of the thing that's talking, or person, I guess, and it's going to pick up the audio. That's not always the case. Especially, it's really not the case to get good audio, because with video, you just point at the object. You can point a microphone at the object, but you got to get it close enough to hear it. And you have to make sure that you're not getting too much, you're not too loud, because it'll kind of get in the red and that gets distorted. That sort of stuff happens. So if you have a podcast, or if you're thinking about making a podcast, I can show you how to do it for basically nothing. And when I mean nothing, I'm talking a very, very small minimum cost. I mean, I'm trying to keep these costs down to a very, very small budget. For the Chris and Christine show, at first, we started off with literally, I think I put maybe $20 microphones we had, and basic headphones. Well, their headphones were decent, but they weren't like basic ones. We'll get into headphones later. But we got real basic microphones. We figured out a way to plug them into the computer, to trick the computer to play both at the same time, record both at the same time. So once we figured that out, the hard part for us was figuring out the audio levels, because we had two of us going on at the same time, and we want the audio to sound decent, and we wanted to first, get it recorded, because, the first thing you want to do with a podcast is you got to have an idea. You got to have something to talk about. Otherwise, you're just like talking to your friend about what you did last week. That'd be fun to you guys, but for everybody listening, they're like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Like, I wasn't there. I wasn't at Joe's house. I don't even know Joe. Why are you telling me this? So make sure you know what you're going to talk about. That's obvious. And when you talk into the microphone, make sure you get the audio at a decent level. Now, like I said, you can have a basic microphone and a basic pair of headphones and a computer. I forgot to mention that. The three main things you really need to do a podcast, I would say, is a microphone. I would start off with a USB, basic, probably with a headphone monitoring jack on the microphone. Decent pair of headphones that are over the ear. Make sure they are not noise canceling. And if they are noise canceling, make sure the noise canceling feature is off. You're like, why? I got these special Bose headphones and they're great. They got noise canceling and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're recording audio with a microphone and you want to hear any kind of like sounds in the background that you may want to edit out, well, how can you not hear them if you don't know if they're even there? Because the headphones are muting those sounds. So you wouldn't even know they're even there. So make sure you do not have noise canceling headphones. I don't know why someone said noise canceling headphones for podcasting, but how are you supposed to hear stuff that you're trying to edit out if you can't hear it? Okay, I'm sorry, I get all hypered up here. And then you need a computer, obviously, right? You need a computer to hook everything up to and record on. Any kind of computer that can take a microphone, that's got a decent processor, that's got internet. The only reason why you need the internet is to just upload it to your web hosting platform. More on that later. But you need an internet connection, especially if you're going to do Skype calls or any kind of like Zoom calls or any kind of stuff. Do not use the microphone on the computer. Do not use the laptop microphone that's built in. I'm sure it sounds great on your Zoom to you. And if you ever heard a Zoom call with a microphone that's on the laptop, it has that echoey sound, like the guy sounds like he's like in the next room, or I guess echoey is the best word I can use for that. That's what happens. It sounds like crap. I'm telling you, crap. Don't do that. Now, over the course of this podcast, I am going to break down the core elements of what you need to do to get started for a very, very cheap price. I will break down cheap microphones I think that should be bought if you're starting out. Now, it's just assuming this is just going to be you doing it by yourself. If you're going to have a co-host in the same environment, like same room, you're going to need a USB interface. but that comes later. What I'm talking about right now is maybe just for the solo person that wants to do a podcast in their room, in next to their computer, just them, nobody else. You can do it, and I'm going to show you how to do it for very, very cheap, and it should sound spectacular. So you're probably thinking, well, what is a podcast? Well, you're listening to a podcast right now. Hate to break it to you. So this is a podcast. Now, the very, very first podcast came out in the year 2004 by our friends Adam Curry and Dave Weiner. They are credited for inventing the podcast. Now, the podcast, what it is, it's like a radio show, talk show, audio format that is on your phone or computer that you can access anytime you want. Almost like I always tell people, it's kind of like YouTube for like audio talk shows, but like a YouTube or Netflix. I guess you can use that one too. I've heard that too. It is actually a podcast by definition. Comes through what is called a RSS feed. And you're thinking, well, what the hell is an RSS feed? Well, an RSS feed stands for really simple syndication, or it's a web feed, so to speak. Now, to break this down, I know it sounds complicated, and trust me, it probably is. I don't even know half this junk, but I do know what it does. What it does is it basically, you take your podcast that you've recorded on your computer. It's all packaged and all ready to go. And then you take that and then you load it onto what is called a hosting site. It's like, say, a storage unit for your audio podcast. You're renting space at these hosting companies, and they will store your podcast for a cost. Some are free. And what they do is, once set up, they convert your audio in something called a RSS feed. And the RSS feed is what gets beamed out to, they say, like the Apple Podcasts or the Google Podcasts or Spotify or whatever those apps you use to listen to podcasting. It actually sends the feed from your audio, from your host, to the apps. And that's how they play. Do you think Apple Podcast actually stores all those podcasts on the Apple app? No, it doesn't. It actually just borrows the feed from the host. Whoever the host is, there's like a bunch of them you can buy. I don't know. There's a ton of them. So once you have your RSS feed, you can upload them to and apply for the Apple Podcast, the Spotify, the Google, the iHeartRadio. We're on all those ones. And once you get your first podcast launched, and once you get like a few downloads or listens, and people start liking it and start listening to it on the regular, you'll see that your numbers will continue to rise. And you'll see people listening from all over the country and all over the world. And you're like, who are these guys? They're listening to our show in Argentina or Egypt, or Spain, or even New York or California. And you're like, wow, that's great. People are hearing me all over the world. And it's kind of surreal to think about, but it's kind of fun at the same time too, because you're creating content and you're putting something in somebody else's ears. It's like having a conversation with somebody else. A podcast can be anything you want it to be. People say it's got to be this or it's got to be that. Your podcast is yours. You do it how you want to do it. The way I look at it, there's basically kind of like two styles of podcasting, I would really say. There's like the business, buttoned up, very serious podcasting of podcasts. And then there's more of the kickback, relaxed, we're going to talk about our fun things we like to do or fun things we like to talk about. It could be hobbies or, vacations you went on or your favorite TV shows. There's really no rule to how you do a podcast. Really no rule at all. The only rule I would say is that make sure the audio is good enough to where people can hear it, But you can design your show any way you want. If you're doing a solo show, eventually you're probably going to want to have a guest on. Now that's another episode we're going to talk about how to do that correctly, what software that we use on the Chris and Christine show to make it sound spectacular, and how we take care of that. But there's plenty of ways you can do that, just like there's plenty of microphones, just like there's plenty of hosting sites, just like there's plenty of audio recording software to record the episode on. And I guess I can probably start with that. The audio recording software that we use is free. Yes. Almost everything I'm going to tell you about today, or in this podcast is going to be free stuff. We use Audacity. Audacity is a free online, you just download it online. It's a free audio digital workstation for audio for your computer. It works on Mac and PC. It's very, very easy to use. I've been using it for a year and a half now, and this is the very first audio software I've ever used. Although I do hear that if you do try to go to Pro Tools or any of the other ones, it's very confusing. And trust me, it is. I downloaded Pro Tools on this computer about a month ago to try it out, and I was so confused. I didn't understand why there was different boxes, why one was up here, one was down there. Why can't I zoom in the way I do it on Audacity? Why can't I edit the way I do it on Audacity? I think Audacity is perfect. It does everything you need it to do, and it has a lot of crazy extra features as far as sound goes. Like you can really fine-tune the sound of everything. The audio, the vocals, the EQ. I mean, you could really get down to the nit and gritty of the actual sound in Audacity. And I think it's great. It's very easy to use. And guess what, kids? It's free. Yes, it's totally free. Get it. I recommend Audacity if you're going to start out doing any kind of podcast stuff. Okay, so let's recap what we actually need to do a podcast. Well, you need a microphone. And I would recommend one that has a USB with a audio headphone jack to do zero latency monitoring. We think, what is latency? Well, latency is the delay it takes for the audio to be set into the microphone and then pop back to your ears or to the computer or whatever. It's latency. With zero latency monitoring with the headphone jack that most of the microphones have, you can plug your headphones directly into the microphone. And as you speak, you will hear it in your ears. It may sound crazy at first, it may sound trippy at first, but it is key to where if you are listening to yourself talk as you talk, you will hear exactly what is being recorded. Like exactly. And you also will hear if there's any kind of sounds like a humming or a buzzing or a chirping or anything else. You're basically going to hear what the microphone hears. So, that way you'll know that there's a problem and you can take care of it right then and there instead of recording everything and then uploading it and then maybe you listen back to it and you realize, was that buzzing in the microphone the whole time? Or what was that weird sound I keep hearing, that clicking sound? Well, if you were listening while you were recording, you could probably have taken that out or stopped it and fixed it at that point. So I would recommend a microphone, USB, that's got a headphone jack that you can listen to with zero latency at the same time. In another episode, I'll probably break down Amazon's best top 10 microphones that have that feature. Next, you definitely need a computer, right? Because how can you hook a microphone up to a USB on a computer? Now, you probably could do it on an iPad. I've seen some people do that. I wouldn't do that. I would just stick with a regular computer or laptop, Mac, PC, whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as you can plug a USB microphone into it so you can record. And then, or obviously, with the computer comes the software to record. And like I said, Audacity. Use Audacity. You can record directly into this. And in fact, right now, I am recording directly into Audacity as we speak. So this is all being done in Audacity. There you go. And then you're obviously going to need decent studio headphones. The ones that I've been using these this entire time since I started a podcast. They are, I don't know the name of them, but they are, I will put them in the show notes or something, but they were like $32 on Amazon. If you look up studio headphones, they're the ones that come up. They're like $35, $32, something like that. And I've been using them the entire time. They're great. And since I've been doing this podcast, I love them. They're fantastic. They feel very comfortable. They're very light. They fold together nice and compact, so you can put them away in a little box and there's no problem. They're great. I love them. You need headphones. So you got the computer, get the headphones, get the microphone, and then you need to save it, obviously. You need to, upload it to a host of your choice. I'm not going to tell you right now, but you pick what podcast platform, what podcast host you want to use, and then you go with them, upload your stuff, and then from there, we'll work on getting it out to the Apple Podcast and the Spotify and all that fun stuff. But for right now, that's kind of the basics on how to really get started. And I know the audio part is going to be really, really hard to do. And because what you're going to do is you're going to hear it and you're going to play it back and you're going to say, why doesn't it sound like such and such podcast? Why doesn't sound like theirs sounds more bright and alive? And I think that's what I did with the Chris and Christine show is I took the show and I said, our goal for the way the audio is supposed to sound, we want to make sure it sounds as good as radio. Like for us, regular FM radio talk shows and regular radio shows was like my benchmark. If I can make our podcast sound as good as theirs, then that's it. And that's the ultimate goal, really, to make it sound like it's something on the radio. So that's what we did. Okay, and as I look at the clock now, we are at about the 20-minute mark, and I think that I wanted to keep these episodes short and neat and tight. They're around 20 minutes. So over the next episodes or so, I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this for. I don't know how many episodes I'm going to do. I don't even know. All I know is that I'm doing this for you guys because I love the audio, but I hate the bad audio, and I want to make sure you guys know what you're doing. So that should get you started if you're starting out doing a podcast. If you already have a podcast, keep listening to more episodes from Podtastic Audio here, and I will show you some tips and tricks to what I do to get my audio to sound spectacular. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time.